Last year on Christmas Eve, I was working late. I'm 23, I work in New York City and commute home every day on the train. Since I'm one of the younger ones in the office, I got stuck with one of the worst shifts. So I wasn't able to get home until 5 o'clock. My family had already left a whole hour earlier to go to my cousin's house. So I had to drive alone. After having a quick snack before the half-hour drive, I got back in my car and put my cousin's address into my phone. Halfway through the drive, it started snowing. I got to my cousin's house around 6 o'clock. It was snowing heavily by this point, and I just made it in time to catch everyone starting dinner. I bought all of the gifts inside and cheerfully said hey to everyone. I stayed until around 11 o'clock. The rest of my family left a little sooner. I stayed an extra half hour or so just to hang out before leaving myself. By the time I was leaving, the ground had accumulated at least 2 feet of snow, and it wasn't even done snowing. The drive home was nightmarish. The roads were hardly even plowed, and I had to drive under 20 miles per hour on most roads. The roads were completely dead at this point though, most likely because everyone was smart enough to go home before the snow accumulated. Eventually, I turned into a main road that I'm sure would usually be bustling, but at 11:15 on Christmas Eve night, there wasn't a single car or a single light from a store. It was a ghost town, but then I did notice the flashing tail lights of one car. It was parked on the side of the road and the smoke seeping out from its exhaust, with the tail light giving it a red tint. As I got closer, I realized there was somebody next to the car waving their hand in the air. I assumed something was wrong and they needed help, so me, being a good Samaritan I am, I pulled up behind the car. I opened my door. The guy approached me immediately, barely even giving me the time to step out. He was an average-sized man, probably 5'10", 180 pounds. He spoke in a very demanding voice, asking me if I knew anything about fixing an engine. I told him I didn't know much about cars. The guy responded very quickly to everything I said. He told me it's fine. He went inside of his car for a second, popped open his trunk, came back out, and told me to just wait by the trunk for a second. I had no idea what he wanted me to do. I was really confused. He walked over to the front of his car, and I heard him open the hood. I couldn't see anything he was doing, since the trunk was blocking my view, and the loud wind of a snowstorm overpowered any small noises he might have been making. I put my hands on the back of the car and leaned my body in anticipation, when suddenly I heard 3 or 4 quick and aggressive footsteps in the snow. Before I was pushed into the trunk, the man tried to close the trunk on me, but I kicked my feet up in resistance and held it up. I was able to overpower him and kick the trunk open completely. As I took advantage of the few seconds I had to get out of the trunk, I took out my keys. He tried to grab me, and I dug my house key right into his neck. He fell to his knees, and his scream echoed down the deserted street. I was in my car and halfway down the road before he could even get up from his knees. A little further down, I called 911 and reported the guy. I came back in 10 minutes to find blue and red lights illuminating the windows of the deserted stores. The police held him until the ambulance arrived for him. I watched the whole thing and nothing ever felt better in my life. I got home safely half an hour later and told my family everything. I was still very shaken that Christmas, and this remains possibly the most horrific thing I've ever experienced. This happened when I was only 5 years old. It was Christmas Eve night, meaning I guess it was technically Christmas, and I had awoken at probably 3 a.m. or something. I walked downstairs to the living room out of my little boy curiosity to see if Santa had delivered any presents yet. The tree was full of presents underneath already. I was so happy Santa had come already. But what was this? There was someone in the kitchen going through the fridge. I remember stepping into the kitchen and seeing a really tall man going through the fridge chucking a milk carton. When he spotted me, he put the carton back in the fridge and shut the door. He then put his fingers on his lips to tell me to be quiet. Are you Santa? I asked him. Yes, I am, he told me quietly. He walked past me, patted me on the head, and stepped into the living room next to the tree. I don't know what I was thinking even at 5 years old, as he wasn't wearing anything even resembling Santa. He looked around at all the gifts. I thanked him for all the presents as he began picking up the bigger boxes. I remember being confused, and I'm pretty sure I asked him why he was doing what he was doing, but I don't remember exactly what he said. I believe it was along the lines of just replacing the gifts with better ones in my sled. I believed whatever he said though. He walks out the back door with 3 boxes, came back momentarily to grab more, then left once again. He came back in and patted me on the back and told me not to tell my parents that I saw him. I smiled and agreed, and he took off with the boxes. I waited for him to come back with the replacement gifts, but he never did. I eventually went up to tell my parents despite what he said. When my parents realized I was not joking, they sat up in shock and fear and ran past me downstairs. When they saw half the presents were gone and the back door was left wide open, my mom screamed like a deranged person. I remember my parents were practically scolding me, demanding for me to describe the person who entered our house. Of course, being 5 years old, the description I gave was anything but useful. All I probably told them was that he was tall. It has been almost 15 years now, though, and at this point for me, being that I was only 5 years old, it is nothing but a story to tell rather than a bad memory at all. As a father of 2, Christmas is already a stressful time of year for me. 2 Christmases ago, my kids were still in love with the idea of Santa Claus. After watching the Polar Express as a family, my wife tucked the kids into bed and she started putting the presents under the tree. I didn't really do any of that stuff. I just laid in bed watching something on TV, waiting for her to come up. By the time she was done, we were ready for bed. We are early birds when it comes to sleep. I'm also a pretty good sleeper. I'm lucky enough to be able to knock out within a few minutes, and waking up in the middle of the night is unusual for me, which is why I was confused at first when I woke up that night. Then I realized why. My daughter, Kelsey, was in the room saying "Daddy" over and over. I rubbed my eyes and asked her what's wrong. She had this cute little happy smile on her face as she said Santa's here. I smiled back at her saying yes, he is. I told her she better be quiet and hurry back to her room so that Santa doesn't find out she is awake. She giggled and said okay and walked out of my room, leaving the door open. I laid back down and tried to get back to sleep. A couple minutes later, I heard some shuffling around downstairs. I sighed because I knew Kelsey probably went down there to open her presents early, which is what she did the year before. I reluctantly got up and walked towards the stairs. As I started clumping down the stairs, the noises I was hearing ceased. I got to the bottom step and I was in the living room by the tree. The lights on the tree were still on, I guess because it was Christmas Eve night. All the presents seemed to still be there, so Kelsey wasn't going through them after all. Still, I walked around the living room and dining room whispering her name just to see if she was hiding somewhere. I gave up and went back up the stairs. I was about to go to my wife and I's room when I decided I would step into Kelsey's room just to check if she was in there. And she was. She was sitting up in her bed wide awake. I asked her why she went downstairs when I told her to go to bed. She whispered excitedly, "It wasn't me. Santa is down there." I tried to begin a sentence, but stuttered and froze. I ran down the stairs and turned on the lights, looking around the whole house. Then I found out the back door was open. Nobody locked it. Someone had broken into our house on Christmas Eve night, right under our noses, and stole a few of the presents left under the tree, according to my wife. The worst part about this is I heard whoever was down there. In fact, my 7-year-old daughter did too. Hell, she even came into my room and basically gives me a warning. It still kills me to this day.